Thank you for joining the channel. Have you ever noticed that your mind can be completely exhausted even though your body hasn't done a thing? You wake up tired, not because you didn't sleep, but because your mind never stopped working. It replayed yesterday's conversations, last week's conversation, last month's conversations. It worried about tomorrow's problems. It questioned decisions you've already made. And somewhere in the middle of all that thinking, you convinced yourself that if you could just think a little harder, you'd finally find peace. But what if the very thing that you're relying on to find peace is the thing that's stealing it? Here's something I've noticed. The people who overthink the most are rarely careless people. They're thoughtful, they're compassionate, they're responsible. They want to make good decisions. They don't want to hurt people. They don't want to fail. They don't want to make mistakes that they'll end up regretting someday. So they think, and they think some more, and yet they think a little bit longer. Then they think about the fact that they're thinking too much until their own mind becomes the loudest room they've ever been in. If that's you, I want you to hear this. You are not broken. You are not weak. And you are certainly not alone. Overthinking is one of the most common experiences we share as human beings. It doesn't discriminate. It affects students wondering if they're smart enough, parents wondering if they're doing enough, leaders wondering if they made the right decision, entrepreneurs questioning every risk, retirees looking back over the choices they made decades ago, things that they can do nothing about, different lives, different stories, the same restless mind. See, for years, I believed overthinking meant I was being responsible. I thought that if I analyzed every possibility, I'd avoid disappointment. If I imagined every worst case scenario, I'd never be caught off guard. If I could just think long enough, I'd eventually arrive at certainty. But life has a way of teaching lessons that thinking alone never can, because certainty is a destination we rarely reach, and waiting for it often becomes the reason we never move. The truth is, your brain was never designed to make you happy. It was designed to keep you alive. Thousands of years ago, that was exactly what was needed. Our ancestors survived because their brains constantly scanned for danger. A rustle in the bushes could mean a predator. A stranger approaching the camp could mean a threat. The people who noticed danger first were often the people who lived long enough to pass their genes on to the next generation. That survival system still exists inside of every one of us. The problem is, most of us aren't running from predators anymore. We're running from possibilities. What if I fail? What if they reject me? What if I embarrass myself? What if this decision ruins everything? Your brain doesn't know the difference between a lion in the grass and an uncomfortable conversation with your boss. To your nervous system, uncertainty feels like danger. That's why your mind keeps searching and scanning for answers. It believes that if it can solve every future problem before it happens, it can protect you from pain. But here's the question I want you to consider. How often has overthinking actually protected you? Think about it. How many nights have you spent laying awake, replaying conversations that never changed? How many hours have you spent worrying about situations that never happened? How many opportunities have you talked yourself out of because your imagination created problems that reality never did? Overthinking promises certainty, but more often than not, it delivers anxiety. It promises control, but leaves us feeling trapped. It convinces us that staying still is safer than moving forward. When in reality, most of life's greatest regrets aren't the mistakes we made, they're the moments we allowed fear to make our decisions for us. That's what makes overthinking so deceptive. It feels productive. It feels responsible. It even feels wise. But thinking isn't the same as growing. Analyzing isn't the same as living. And understanding every possible outcome isn't the same as taking the next step. Here's something I've learned. Some answers only reveal themselves after you make a move, not before. And that's where freedom actually begins. Here's the second part. The first step to breaking free from overthinking is understanding something important. Your thoughts are not always telling you the truth. They are telling you a narrative, a story, and those two things are not the same. Your mind is constantly interpreting the world around you. It takes experiences, memories, fears, past disappointments, and it uses all of those things to create meaning. But sometimes the meaning your mind creates is not reality. Sometimes it's just a reflection of what you've been through. Think about a person who has experienced rejection. They apply for a job and don't get selected. One interpretation might be, I wasn't the right fit for this position. Another interpretation might be, I'm not talented enough. I'm never going to succeed. I'm always being overlooked. The event is the same, but the story we attach to the event changes everything. This is where overthinking becomes dangerous, because eventually we stop questioning the story. We start believing it. We allow temporary moments to create permanent identities. A failure becomes, I'm a failure. A mistake becomes, I'm not capable. A difficult season becomes, this is just who I am. But you are not every thought you have. You are the person who gets to decide which thoughts deserve your attention. And that distinction changes everything. So how do we begin quieting an overactive mind? The first thing is learning to separate facts from fiction. When your mind starts racing, ask yourself, what do I actually know? Not what do I assume, not what am I afraid might happen, what do I actually know? Because fear fills in the blanks. Fear creates stories where information is missing, but facts bring you back to reality. The second thing is learning to stop searching for perfect certainty. See, many people who overthink are waiting for a feeling that may never come. They believe something like this: when I feel completely confident, I'll take action. But confidence rarely comes before action. Confidence is usually created through action. You don't become confident and then take the step. You take the step, learn from the experience, and then confidence grows. The person who waits until they have no doubts may be waiting forever. Because courage isn't the absence of uncertainty. Courage is moving forward while uncertainty exists. The third thing is learning to trust yourself. And this may be the hardest one, because many people who overthink have spent years doubting their own judgment. They ask everyone else for opinions. They search for every possible answer. They look everywhere except within themselves. Now, there's nothing wrong with seeking wisdom. We all need guidance. We all need people who challenge us and help us to grow. But eventually, you have to trust the person making the decision. You have to believe that even if things don't go perfectly, you are capable of handling what comes next. Because life is not about making perfect choices. It's about becoming someone who can handle imperfect outcomes. The goal is not to create a mind that never worries. That's impossible. The goal is to create a mind that doesn't control you. Your thoughts will come. Your fears will speak. Your doubts will appear. But you get to choose whether they lead. You get to choose whether they define you. You get to choose whether they keep you frozen or help you move forward. And maybe that's the greatest lesson about overthinking. The answer isn't always finding the perfect thought. Sometimes the answer is learning when to stop listening. Because your life is happening right now, not in the future, not in the future you're imagining, not in the past you're replaying, right now. The conversation you're afraid to have, the decision you're afraid to make, the dream you're afraid to pursue. At some point, thinking has to become living. Because a life spent analyzing every possibility is a life you never fully experience. So if your mind has been running nonstop, if you've been carrying worries that were never yours to carry, if you've been trapped inside questions that don't have immediate answers, I want you to remember this. You are not your fears. You are not your mistakes. You are not every thought that passes through your mind. You are a human being. And you are a human being that is still becoming, still learning, still growing, still unfinished. And maybe that's the beautiful thing about being human. We are never a finished product. We are always evolving. We are always growing, always discovering, always becoming. So give yourself permission to take the next step, not because you have every answer, but because you trust yourself enough to find the answers along the way. If this conversation connected you with something you've been experiencing, I'd invite you to continue exploring these ideas here on the Unfinished Human YouTube channel. Because the more we understand why we think, why we feel, and why we respond the way we do, the better we understand ourselves. And when we understand ourselves, we begin to understand each other.